Today on TimesCast, President Obama's visit to Indonesia is cut short because of an active volcano.
We are gathered together today.
Gay couples file new lawsuits attacking the federal government's Defense of Marriage Act. And Conan O'Brien's new show makes its debut, and he now faces new competition.
I think he was deliberately sending a message to NBC.
President Obama arrives in Indonesia on Tuesday for a long-anticipated visit, but a volcano interrupts his stay. We have this report from Yogyakarta, 20 miles south of Mount Merapi.
This is Audrey Belford reporting for the New York Times from Yogyakarta near Mount Merapi in Indonesia, which has so far claimed over 150 lives. What's happening with the volcano now is still very, very active. The volcanology office here has said that its intensity has decreased over the last day, but they're still saying that it's at the highest level of alert and is still restricting anyone by getting anywhere close to it. President Obama's visit has been seen by Indonesians as something of a homecoming. So what he's going to miss, I think, is largely going to be this sense of returning to these places that he grew up as a child. As far as high-level meetings, that's all gone ahead as planned. He met with President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono today and gave a joint press conference. He's still scheduled to deliver his speech at the University of Indonesia tomorrow. So on that level, it looks like things aren't too terribly interrupted. By and large, the Indonesian public's very receptive to him. The most powerful person in the world actually knows where the country is, where they're coming from, knows a bit of the language, enjoys the local food. Things like that really do sort of warm the hearts of people here, and you can see that in the media coverage right now, that despite some disappointment, people mostly do hold a positive impression of President Obama, although, you know, like with the American public, that enthusiasm has worn off with time.
On Tuesday, 2 lawsuits were brought against the 14-year-old Defense of Marriage Act. Reporter John Schwartz on the legal implications.
John, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy is very much in the news, but also a 14-year-old law, Defense of Marriage Act from 1996, which prohibits the federal government from recognizing same-sex marriage. This one is also back in the news today. What's going on?
Well, 2 organizations, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, or GLAAD up in Boston, and the ACLU, have filed lawsuits challenging the law.
Can you give us a couple of examples?
The ACLU case involves an estate tax question. Edie Windsor and Thea Spire were married. They had been together for more than 40 years when Ms. Spire died, and the government required $350,000 in estate tax from Ms. Windsor, which she wouldn't have had to pay if their marriage had been recognized. In the other case, Joanne Peterson and Ann Meitzen are married in Connecticut, where it's legal. They'd like to get Ms. Meitzen on Ms. Peterson's federal health insurance. She's a former federal employee, a civilian naval analyst, and just getting her on the insurance should be a simple matter if they were a man and wife, but because they're 2 women in a lesbian relationship, it's not allowed.
So a federal judge in Boston in July had already ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional. That decision's being appealed. Now we have a whole new wave of lawsuits today. Where is all of this heading, and what's the upshot?
And these 2 new cases add to the pressure and also possibly increase the likelihood that by being in a new circuit that this could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Does Conan O'Brien's new TV show offer a chance for him to reinvent his TV personality?
Here he is, Conan O'Brien!
So, Bill, last night Conan O'Brien is back on with his new show on TBS. How do you think he did?
Well, I think he was the old Conan. I think he was the Conan that we saw the last 2 weeks that he was on The Tonight Show when he was feeling liberated. I think he was deliberately sending a message to NBC that he's going to go back to the guy that is highly energized and free with his ideas, because he came out and he did the string dance, which NBC hated him doing. Of course, the audience loved it.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about intellectual property, and NBC owns sort of the comedy bits Conan did. What other message was Conan?
Well, he made loud and clear that he's going to use whatever he wants, because he brought his masturbating bear on. And that was the one thing that everybody said, will he be able to use? He used it on his first show.
Does NBC have a legal leg to stand on?
They might, but I don't think they'd bother. At this point, it'd be embarrassing to them to try to take Conan to court. They want to get that off their books and forget about him.
Right. A lot has been written about, you know, Conan's return to late night and going up against Jay Leno and The Tonight Show and Letterman. But isn't his competitive set different now?
Yeah, it's totally different. He really is competing against Jon Stewart mainly. They're on the same hour, 11 o'clock. They're both on cable, and they're both going for the same audience, the under 35 crowd.
And Jon actually mentioned him last night.
Yeah, Jon came on and did a little thing looking through TV Guide.
Same time as me! Now I'll never be able to watch me.
And how did Conan do last night?
He had the biggest number of any late night show. Nothing like he had in the Tonight Show, but a big number. And he really dwarfed Jon, so he won the first battle.
How do you think it's going to play out?
I think it's going to be a struggle long term because I think Jon is very hot and very strong, and Jon is very competitive. So as time goes on, I think you're going to see that to be a really big challenge for Conan to beat Stewart regularly.
Join us again tomorrow for TimesCast.